we are having some technical difficulties. So I'm just going to see if we can, hopefully this shows up live. And if not, Tara, we're going to re-record tomorrow. So where were we? We were talking all about grief. We were talking about your story. So I wanted to share that with everyone again. Sorry about that, Tara. Around what it looked like to grieve a widow, and grieve a partner rather, whilst also raising two neurodivergent children. So if you can share that with us again, while I just do some extra lifting in the background, just to make sure that we're all good to go. And hopefully this time it works. But like I said, Tara, if it doesn't, we will go back to doing it again tomorrow, and it'll be what it is. So go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nat. I think I got to just letting everybody know that we had to go through the chemo situation. Blair ended up passing just on the 14th of March 2020. So it was 4 days before the planet shut down, which I really wasn't paying any attention to, because obviously we were devoted to trying to keep Blair alive. Then all of his friends turned up, and they had organised a surprise birthday party for him because it was his birthday. Unfortunately, they ended up coming for what turned out to be a funeral. But we weren't actually able to have a funeral because, as it turns out, as I see it, everything shut down during that whole week. So initially, we were super supported, and we had like friends and family from different countries all turned up for this crazy situation. So he went out of the world with all of his friends and family by his side, which was an amazing thing to be able to do. But then very quickly, everybody had to jump on their planes and head back home to wherever they lived in order to be able to make it back to their borders. And so my daughter and son and I suddenly went into like a hibernation, I suppose, because not just because we were in shock and we were doing, the initial part of grieving, but because there were no facilities, there was no groups, there was no counselling, any of that sort of thing available for about 6 months. So the beginning of widowhood is that you are in shock and you are running on automatic. Whatever automatic thoughts or routines you have deeply embedded in you, they run. Thank goodness. So first tip is, if you're running a reasonably healthy life and a reasonably healthy routine, that's what your body would automatically get up and do with you. But after a little while, it starts to fade, because you are equally crying and slowly noticing that things are not the same, that the person isn't coming through the door at 6 o'clock at night, that you're buying 4 steaks when you only need 3. There's so many little tiny things about the lifestyle, about the day-to-day, that are nothing to do with the beautiful human that passed. But they are the things that your mind starts to freak out about. Because one of the things about grief, and I think this was the hardest thing for me to learn, it's actually the opposite of bonding. So as humans, as families, we bond for all kinds of different reasons, to different things. But then when that thing finishes or dies, we have to dismantle the bond. And it's that process where our neurology takes over, and our whole body is fully taking over. And so grieving the loss of my beautiful husband and the children's father, as all widows will find, it's like a 2 stories running parallel. You've got I miss his smell. I miss his smile. I miss his jokes. I miss bumping into him between the fridge and the cupboard, these kind of things. But equally, I miss the end of every decision, the end of every transaction, the end of every cup of tea, or every putting things in the cupboard where he would somehow be part of it.
Yeah.
And so that for us was pretty much the first 6 months, was just starting, slowly noticing all of that change. And it's, as a mum, I put a lot of that aside because I was trying to make sure that the children were coping. And that's probably something that, again, I would say tip number 2 is you are actually supposed to put the oxygen mask on yourself, but we don't. And so, yeah, absolutely, my kids came first, and watching them and observing them and trying to make sure I was present with them. I used everything I had in my mind, everything I'd known and could draw upon around how to console somebody who's crying. And that was good. It certainly helped us. And to some degree, there was a bit of merit in having COVID because we were not actually able to disappear off and do things. We had the privacy, for want of a better word, to just be in our house and be in our pajamas for a week if we needed to, those sorts of things. But yes, very quickly with the kids, particularly, I have a at that time I had a 6-year-old and a 13-year-old. So they were experiencing very different grief topics according to their developmental stage. But yeah, so I suppose in answer to your question, how we grieved was initially we didn't make any conscious choice about it at all. We just let it all come out, however it came out. And my sole purpose and intention for that was making sure that everyone felt completely free to express however it came out. That at no point was there any you should or shouldn't. That you can't be like that. You can't be angry. You can't blurt. You can't be noisy or emotive. You can't go into your... None of that. It had to be, because we didn't know what to do. And it made sense that society's social rules, what would apply in an office block, what would apply in a school assembly, is not appropriate when this utter devastation has come out. So I was really glad that those early days, even though we didn't know what to expect, that at least we gave each other that kindness. So, yeah, for us, it was quite tricky. And with all the border closures, we were quite close to the New South Wales and Queensland borders. So we had rules on one supermarket. It was on the Queensland side with all the food, and we were on the New South Wales side without all the food. So it was quite tricky. You know, some of the counsellors that were available were in Queensland, but New South Wales people weren't allowed. We had to fly to Sydney if we wanted a counsellor. There was just some bizarre things going on. You know, for so many people, particularly, I know that you were in Melbourne, and you know, I would never want to suggest that New South Wales and Queensland had a bad run, but it was always a little bit tricky because, as you will remember, Queensland seemed to get all the benefits. All the rest of the country was like,
Yes, so definitely, so much of that.
It was like watching, you know, a sitcom or something. But I think that probably magnified a lot of the grieving that we had to go through. And I learnt later on, because we didn't have the resources, because we didn't have social workers or council groups or church groups even to go to and get help, because we weren't allowed to cross over and get a cup of tea and sit with our neighbour. My family was 1,200 kilometres away, so they weren't able to get through their border controls to get to us. So lots of little things there. I luckily had the resources in my mind to then go online. And so I was able to start, out of sheer necessity, try to make sense of things, try to look up what does a grieving mother need, what does a grieving 6-year-old need, what does a grieving 13-year-old need. And I had to look hard.
Really? So
Yeah.
the information wasn't readily available?
Not at all. And it's hard to imagine now in 2024 that the online space, how thorough and saturated it was. Health service, mental health services were completely locked down to being a private one-on-one conversation in a closed room where you and the face-to-face counselor or psychologist had that conversation. And that was such a traditional method of delivery. But COVID stopped that. And it took the government a long time. I think it's one of the few things I was pleased Scott Morrison rushed through, was being able to facilitate healthcare providers to do these telehealth type things.
Yep.
But that took 6-8 months before that was available, and then of course the whole country was in desperate need of all sorts of mental health assistance. But at least we then were able to, Cancer Council, for example, were just fantastic. They dialed up to us, I think it was 8 months after he passed, and said, "Hey, we're finally online. Would you like some help and some counselling?" And so the kids got a little bit of that, which was amazing.
Oh, I love that.
So that was helpful. But with all of that, the damage had already begun for the kids and for me, because we didn't have that immediate holistic access to grief recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. I can appreciate that, because thinking back to my journey, it was so hard for so many people who no one was dying, right? And as people were dying. Let me rephrase that. People were definitely dying, but I'm saying, like, if you were in a family where everyone was somewhat healthy, you were still struggling. You were still like not coping. So to think that you were trying to navigate lockdowns on top of losing a partner blows my mind. And I don't even know how that would even look. So hats off to you for even having the courage, even though you didn't get a choice, but having the courage to be able to stand through that. So I wanted to go through some questions for you. So what are some of the myths that you've come across when it comes to grief and, children that are grieving? What have you found?
So, no disrespect to the baby boomers, because, they were raised through with families who've been through 2 world wars and a Great Depression. So it was a very different world for them.
100%. Yeah.
But there are certainly a lot of one of my favorites is that kids bounce back. They're really resilient. And before I understood that I had neurodiversity on the table as well, I had myself been through a number of things in my childhood where I was very aware that no, kids don't bounce back. They shut up and they sit quietly and terrified and just grip death, hold on to whatever they have to do until their surroundings of safety and certainty level out. And once they get to that point where, okay, I'll just play with my toys, playing with my toys, that's in the safe zone. But going to bed at night, not sure if anyone's going to be there when I wake up, not sure what's going to happen to my body when it wakes up. What if I don't wake up? What if they don't wake up?
Yeah.
So the myths that children, bounce back really quickly, was the toughest one,
Yeah.
because I could see my children were not bouncing back.
Mhm.
I was, very quickly, I realized that was an unfair expectation, um, for them, because the person that they went to problem solve to, the person who taught them how to hold a spoon, the person that helped provide food, that gave them a hug, that killed the spiders, that safely drove the car. Like, I had roles and my husband had roles, and the children arrived on the planet, and the two people that guided them to how humanity operates, what's a tree, what's a dog, don't touch the hot plates, everything belonged to these two people, me and my husband. And when that person dies, it's not like in a divorce where perhaps they're having, there's fights and there's bad behavior, and maybe you can explain away the fact that daddy chose a different path, or mummy, whatever. But when it's a death, it's like, well, there's no explanation. How do I now, as a child, prepare and change all my thinking to know that I'm not going to do that exact same thing? So it's really interesting that a lot of the behaviors that I came across, where the kids would refuse to do stuff, or they would, get really clingy, or a seesaw between the two, were because of that. They weren't actually bouncing back. They really needed some help to understand not just the, celestial concept of death, but literally, is the person coming back?
Yeah.
What other adult can I insert into that role?
Mhm.
And if you can't give me a person to do that, well, I'm just going to go and hold fire and hold my breath until I can figure out, is it safe to go down that path again? So that was definitely my biggest one.
Yeah.
And especially at school, like, oh, kids bounce back. Yeah, just send them to school and they'll play and they'll hang out with their mates. Yeah, if school is exactly the same as it was the day before, they still got people there. But then after they go automatic into school and they go automatic into play, but it doesn't take very long for them to start to get really nervous and understand it's not the same. Dad didn't pick me up. When somebody asks me, what did you do on the weekend? And I say, cry all weekend, the kids very quickly can't answer those normal things. And so they start to have fights at school, and all sorts of things come up because they're not bouncing back. Because if we use that myth, they're going to miss out on proper grief education. They're going to miss out on expressing to you what's hurting, what's scary. So yeah, I think, and especially, for the younger kids, they don't have the adult concepts, but they do have a bigger need to get their routine safe and standard. My teenager, on the other hand, she had some emotional understanding. And so she was able to think into the future for a bit more and understand that she was going to miss out on a bunch of stuff. And, that still worries both of them today. I haven't necessarily thoroughly solved that for them. And there's some experiences they're only coming across now that they now realize what the impact was.
Oh, I'm over here having a heavy heart, so I don't.
Sorry.
No, no. And I'm so glad that you are able to go into so much detail, because there are widows out there, whether they have neurodivergent children or not, who just aren't coping, who don't have the resources, who don't know where to go, who are feeling overwhelmed themselves. and who can't pick themselves up off the floor, I'm sure, and maintain that life the way that it used to be, because it doesn't look like that anymore. And I can't, I am just so appreciative that you even exist, that you have this platform to be able to share with people, and that you're able to explain that this is what's going on. So obviously with your children, they are neurodivergent. Are you able to share with them, if you're comfortable, their diagnoses and how grief affected them being neurodivergent?
Yeah, love to. So what was really interesting is that I knew my daughter was a bit different, but I didn't have, I didn't grow up with a lot of maternal information, and certainly didn't grow up wanting to be a mum. So I hadn't, immersed myself in that child education sort of space, or anything. I was a banker. So what I saw in my daughter growing up were quirky things. People around me kept telling me it was just quirkiness. She was just an arty type, perhaps a bit stubborn like her father. So there were things there that people explained away, and I knew there was something that wasn't quite right, but I had no understanding that that had an impact. And so when my husband got sick, the stress for both children started off being, okay, they're just really stressed. And that felt normal to me. That felt like, of course they're stressed. I'm stressed. Not knowing how to cope with the stress. Of course, they're just children. So again, it was an opportunity to explain away. My daughter, though, started to realize when he was getting more and more sick, and she was sort of chatting to her friends at school a little bit. She said to me, I think there's something different about me, Mum. There's a couple of girls at school who have autism or ASD, and ADHD, and it feels and sounds like me. I said, oh, okay. Now, hubby had always said no diagnosis because I don't want her getting bullied, which was very traditional for when he was growing up as an experience, unfortunately. Anyway, so after he passed and the doors opened up finally to allow psychologists and psychiatrists to take on clients again, I got Sammy in front of a psychologist, which was great. And he said to me pretty much straight away, she's got ADHD for sure, and and autism. I'd love to get her tested. And Sammy and I talked about it, and she was like, yeah, great. I'd love to find out what on earth's going on.
Yeah.
James's psychologist had said, look, for his age, because he was 6 at the time, she said, I'd like to leave it a year and just see how the grief settles down for him, because he has a lot of anger management issues and things, before I actually diagnose whether it's ADHD or autism or both, or, which is it. That was my first clue that grief and the stress and the trauma and the repeated trauma of Blair getting sick, sometimes going to in the ambulance, sometimes not. Then obviously COVID, school shutting down, all these little traumas were slowly building and re-traumatizing the children. And so that was my first witness from the psychologists, that it's not just like one grief moment, resolve it, be done. That the little traumas were magnifying the undercurrent of autism in both of them. And the ADHD was in fact the body's way and the disorder that comes from the trauma not being managed. So that was really interesting. So Samantha jumped to level 2 autism because she had some tics, like her head was ticking, her hands would tick, her dysregulation was high. James was the same. He had a lot of dexterity issues. Samantha's executive function was never great, but became really a whole lot worse. And then when the grief layer became more evident, because, as the psychologist explained, their main source of dopamine had gone. So the dopamine circuitry that normally helps to support the executive function aspects was empty.
Yeah. Right.
So that's where, and it was I had to grow up really quickly, because I too was battling. Like the psychologist for James actually ended up saying to me, like, I 100% diagnosed him for ADHD because we had all the reports from the teachers and things as well. And he said, but I'm going to hold off on autism in case he wants to go into the military or the police force.
What?
And I was like,
why?
No, I said, oh, thank you. That's great. Okay. Because I thought he was doing a good thing. And it never occurred to me that would be ludicrous. It was a neurotypical thing to do.
Yeah, no, I can, now that you've said it, I absolutely can see it from a typical point of view. And I also think from a typical point of view that you're sort of hoping that it's not that, right? You're like, oh, maybe he's not autistic and it's just ADHD and it's okay.
Yeah.
But if I look at everyone around me, people just do so much better if they know what they're dealing with, right? Yeah. So if they know that they're autistic or if they know that they're ADHD, cool, I know how to better support my environment because of this, as opposed to I'm just going to run around in circles because I don't really know how to better support myself. And people, the adults around me, don't know how to better support me because they don't know what's going on either.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Now, I'm surprised to hear that coming from a psych.
Yeah, and I think it's a thing, though, that made perfect sense from the point of view of, yes, your child has needs, and yes, we're going to manage them effectively. I'm going to give you resources. A great deal of their therapy will be nurture based. Mm-hmm. So we're going to provide them with a pediatrician, with an occupational therapist, with a speech pathologist. But let's minimize the bullying. Let's minimize the pushing you to the outliers of society because of a label that culturally we don't understand. So it was such an interesting time to learn this whole new side of society. If somebody's got sugar problems or pancreatic problems, they go and get tested for diabetes and everybody's all over it.
Yeah, exactly.
All over it. But to have some kind of neurodivergence is like just puts the fear of God into us as parents, because that suddenly, are they going to hold a job down? Are they going to be able to make friends? Are they going to, if they can't get through school, what does that mean about me and my ability to be a new age, corporate working, aspirational woman? I now have to go, my focus has to change to be, looking after children who actually have a disability or a disorder or actually need a whole different set of skills to the ones I'd been focusing on. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting to have that. And of course, then I questioned myself, and then we discovered, some of the source of their autism. And yeah, I think that also was another step in me grieving. So beginning to grieve the life that the children would now have versus the life they were living. It had a whole extra layer that the tragedy that then magnified something in them. So they were now actually physically and mentally suffering as well as emotionally. And then looking back through my marriage and seeing all the decisions I made, all the problems I made, all of the things that we did or didn't experience, all of the things we could have or should have done. That has taken a long time to grieve, because as any mother has guilt, and then you look around and you think, gosh, I wonder if that was the thing I should have paid more attention to, or maybe if I'd done, X, Y, and Z. So the actual diagnosis, and I think this is what I've shared with you a lot, and I loved being able to get that support, is that the diagnosis itself, whilst absolutely critical to be able to provide the right everything going forward, it does come with a grieving process to dismantle all of the perhaps incorrect future that we create for ourselves. We imagine at 6 that we're going to get married and do all these things and have children and it's all going to be wonderful. We have to dismantle all of that.
Yeah, total. I absolutely agree with you. And there are so many parents that are in the midst of dismantling those ideas because that's not what is presenting at the moment. Maybe they've got a child who's non-speaking, and having that diagnosis of autism now makes them think like, what does that mean for the future, and how does that look? So I totally understand about that. What are some tips that you can share with widows who've got kids that maybe are having a hard time?
Yeah. I think that one of the wonderful things, and this may sound strange to people hear me say it's wonderful, but the way that we can respond to a child when they're grieving or when they're neurodiverse is really similar, and is not tough love and consequences. Understanding or coming to terms with the understanding that they are in a space of fear. They're as much aware that they're different, that they're not meeting your expectation, whatever the expectation is, that the words that come out of your mouth, our mouth, when we ask them to do something and they have to say, I can't, is a disappointment for them, because maybe what mum's asking me to do is something I would like to be able to do. Or maybe what they're asking me would make her happier or take the pressure off her. Their children are as much aware that widowed mum, is sad and suffering and lonely and missing dad just as much and worried. And for them to not be able to actually execute any help worries them as much. So parenting as a widow, the first thing I did was I signed up to a parenting course to completely rewrite what I thought I knew, what somebody told me, and I'd filed at the back here, and allow myself to speak kindly, to go into all my interactions with what would love do, what would love say. What if I was 6 and I was trying to communicate something?
Yeah.
No child who is neurodiverse or grieving has any intention of being naughty.
No, gosh, no.
None of them. They have no intention of being mean or cruel. or stubborn, or any of the words that can accidentally come out of our mouth. Disrespectful. They're operating from all the rules have gone out the window because the person who created half of them has gone out the window.
Yeah, true.
And they have to reestablish everything. And if the one person left in control is a mess, then they're going to naturally give us, worried behaviors. And when we see that, it's like, to take a deep breath and realize no shame, no judgment, no guilt. Okay, we need to regulate, we need to sit down, and we need to come back to basics. Even if it's a dinner and you have barely been able to string a meal together, and the kids complain about it and they don't like it, they don't want it. You're freaking out because you've got to feed them something, and now they're not eating it, and now it's all turned into a big mess. Well, maybe they're not hungry because they're grieving something themselves. Maybe we use some kindness and say, okay, guys, this is the meal that's available. If you don't feel like eating right now, let's put it in some Tupperware and get it later. Because the stress and the pressure of grief and neurodiversity is working really hard already without accidentally showing our kids that we're disappointed or frustrated with them. And so I found talking about that out loud with the kids and really opening up the conversation. Guys, you need to have some vegetables because all of your grieving is needs nutrients.
Yeah.
The meals that I have cooked, okay, I did burn them. I'm sorry. It's okay that you don't like them because I know in my heart I ruined it because I was too busy crying on the floor in the kitchen and I completely forgot to turn the sausages over.
Yeah.
Lean into the mistakes, lean into the messiness and clumsiness of widowhood with our children, lean into the grieving experience. Allows everybody to start feeling safe again, feeling loved and kind with each other, accepted, and you'll be surprised how quickly things start to lift properly themselves.
Yeah.
Resisting the grief, trying to push all the sadness and everything away ends up, unfortunately, manifesting itself again.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes a bit of sense, Nat, but definitely it was bringing kindness and curiosity and presence back into the situation and showing them what grieving looks like, and then showing them that I still love them. They still love each other. We all still love each other after we've had a big yell and scream about the cushion was in the wrong place because that's the way we're releasing our anger, or someone shouldn't have said something or whatever. Come back together and just bring some patience and kindness to each other.
Yeah, definitely. I love that so much. Where can people find you, Tara? On Facebook and Instagram?
So on Instagram, it's My Widow's Toolbox. The website is My Widow's Toolbox, and Facebook is my name, but I also do have a group. It's My Toolbox for Widows. Just a really great opportunity for everybody to come and ask questions and get some tips and tricks and share their experiences as they go. Because, having become a coach now and studied grief, I I understand it more, and I understand the neurology of it. I understand the psychology of it and the human behavior with it. And I think understanding that it is that grief and neurodiversity actually present really similarly on a day-to-day level, and that the kindness that you need to show children and the kindness that you need to give yourself really helps to bond and really helps to let the children grieve thoroughly and efficiently and healthily, which actually takes a lot of the load off. And so if there's anything I could do to help widows who have neurodiverse children decipher, is there naughtiness and their change in behavior because they're in a growth spurt and hungry, or is it because they've had a hormone change and their meds are not the same or not working, or maybe it's that they've just remembered that dad used to do a certain thing and that's really made them sad. To have someone to nut that out with can be really helpful.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever received as a parent or a professional?
Definitely framing everything with the question, what would love do?
Oh, I love that. What's one thing you wish you knew when you started your autism journey?
That they don't grow out of it like a stubborn phase or a gothic phase, that it's actually a physical experience that they're having, and that they can't rather than they won't.
Yeah, right. Yep, love that. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
To be able to rewire brains, I think.
Love it. Yes, me too. What's a small win you've celebrated with your family recently?
My boy James, he's just growing into the most incredible young boy. But for him, it was he turned to me the other day and was cuddling the dog, and he said, "Mom, my heart feels so warm and full of love and joy. This puppy dog is just making me so happy." And I thought, oh my God, he could communicate that and recognized it and just was soaking in all of the joy that actually gave him. And I thought, that's amazing. We have progressed so well.
100%. Being able to verbalize that, because something that's not really tangible, that they don't understand, that to be able to verbalize it is beautiful. I love that. And last question, what does resilience mean to you?
Resilience for me is knowing that you might not have all the answers or all the skills, but that you are capable of finding them, learning them, and executing them.
Yes.
That you want to do that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, once again, where can people find you on Facebook and Instagram?
So Facebook will be My Toolbox for Widows, and Instagram is My Widows Toolbox.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Tara. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the chat. And you've dropped so many gems, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've loved this, and I hope that, someone has been able to take something away that changes their life. Thank you so much, Nat.
Thanks, Tara. Thank you. Bye.